Consuelo, everybody. Okay, last time we looked at how to read the equation. Today, we're actually going to graph something. Now, I want to remind you, you have to start with something. Either I'm giving you the graph that you start with, or you have to have those memorized graphs. Those are what you're going to start with. So let's take a look at this first problem real quickly. I'm giving you the graph, okay? Let's take a look at the second one. I'm giving you the graph. Let's take a look at the last one. I'm not giving you the graph, but you should know what the basic equation is for this, and you should know how to graph it with almost without even thinking. So you've always got to start with something and then do all the stretch, compress, reflect, blah, 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 blah. Okay? All right, let's take a look. What you've got to do is you've got to tell me what you're going to do, and then you've got to do it. So let's take a look at this. Again, first of all, notice it's not written as an equation. So the first thing you should do is at least think of it as equals to y. Okay? Now, let's take a look. We have a 1/2, we have a -1, and we have a -3. We're going to deal with the shifts last, so I'm going to talk about the 1/2. Okay, could I move that half over to the y? And I'm going to go through the reading part pretty quickly. So if you have a question, get back to me. But I assume you can read these things fairly well now after the last video. And if you can't, you need to talk to me. Okay, so can I move the half over to the y? Yes, I can. So it's changing y. Is it on the same side as the y? No, it's not. It's on the opposite side. So you do exactly what it says. So you multiply y by a half. Okay, let's take a look at the 1. I can't move it over, so it's with the x. Since it's actually written with the x, I do the opposite of what it says. So I go 1 to the right. Okay, and the 3, I can move it to the y. So it's changing the y. Since it's on the opposite side of the equation as the y, I do exactly what it says, and I go 3 down. Okay, what I'm going to do is go through and read each equation first, and then we'll come back and do it. Okay. Because if you can't read the equation, I want you to realize right now, okay, you don't know how to read the equation if you don't, and then you got to stop, okay, and just talk to me. Okay, again, let's think of this as equal to y. We've got the -2 and the +2. Okay, so we'll do the multiplication first. So I could move the -2 over so it's with the y. Since it's on the opposite side of the equation, I do exactly what it says. So I'm going to multiply y by -2. Okay, and then the x plus 2, I can't move it over. So that 2 is with the x. Since it's on the same side of the equation, I do the opposite of what it says. So I'm going to shift it 2 to the left. Okay, let's take a look at the last one. Well, I didn't give you an equation here, so you have to know what the equation is. So the basic equation is y equals square root of x, and you should recognize that. It's obviously not an absolute value. It's not a square. It's not a cube. Okay, so what do we have here? We have -1 and -2. Okay, none of these are multiplication. So what we're going to do is they're both shifts. And you should know that the first one is you're going to shift 1 to the right. And the second one is you're going to go 2 down. Okay? All right. Now, what you have to do, and I'm not going to do this by an XY table, like where you pick points off the graph and then you actually multiply y by a half and then go 1 right and 3. You can do that. And if you want to ask me about it, ask me about it. I'm just going to pick points on this graph. Now, what would be some important points on this graph? There's this one right here. There's this one right here. There's this one right here. And there's this one right here. And, if you want to pick ones on the axes, they're good too. So, like, I could also pick that one. I could pick that one. And then one on, those would be good. But you really don't need those extra ones. If the first 4 that I put, they would be enough to define the curve. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is multiply y by a half. And I'm not changing the x value. So I'm going to put little x's. Let's take this first point over here on the far left. Multiply, its y coordinate is 0. If you multiply its y coordinate by a half, you still get 0. That point stays right there. This next point has a y coordinate of, what is that? -6. So if you multiply y by a half, you get -3. That's where it would move to. Okay? The point on the y-axis has a y coordinate of -2. Multiply it by a half, and you get -1. Okay, the next one has on the x-axis has a y coordinate of 0. If you multiply that by a half, you get 0 still. The next point has a y coordinate of 2. Multiply that by a half, and you get 1. Next one has a y coordinate of 0. Multiply that by a half, and you still get 0. And the next one has a y coordinate of what is that? -6, so you'd end up with -3. Okay? Now, what does this look like? And again, I'm dashing it because it's not the final answer. But that's what you'd be looking at. Okay? Now, let's take that and shift it 1 right and 3 down. So let's take this first point, starting over on the left, and go 1 right and 1, 2, let's see, 1 right and 1, 2, 3 down, and that's the point you'd get. Let's take the next one that I've got this X. You go 1 right and 1, 2, 3 down, and you get it right there. Let's take the one that's on the y-axis at 0, -1. Let's go 1 right and 1, 2, 3 down. Then let's take the next one that's on the x-axis and go 1 right and 1, 2, 3 down. Then let's take the next, and you might have to, go through this again and take it and pause it, etc. Go 1 right and 1, 2, 3 down. And then we'll take this one on the x-axis and go 1 right and 1, 2, 3 down. Now this next one's kind of weird, because if I go 1 right, that gets me over here, right, which is off the grid, but I'm just going to put 1, 2, 3 down. So it'd be something like about there. And usually I don't like to go off the grid, and you don't really need to here, but there is actually a way you can do this without going off the grid. But for the first time we do it. Okay, so what happens? You get something that looks like this. Didn't do too well there, but okay. So if you take a look at this, look at the original graph, okay? And then look at the dashed graph. What I've done is I've smashed it by a half. I've like crushed it, okay? And then I just took it and I got the final graph by going 1 to the right and 3 down. Now, again, can you do it this way? Yeah, that's fine. But again, as they get harder, and since this is the first time we've done it, I'm going to go back and redo this with XY tables, okay? And I don't mean an XY table like plugging in numbers, et cetera, et cetera. We're just going to pick points off the graph. And if we look at the original, okay, if we look at the original, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead. I mean, you can go back and look at this thing. I'm going to get rid of everything that I've done and see how would we do this if we wanted to make the XY table. Okay. All right. Okay, let's pick some points. So what's that point? That point is 8, 0. What's this point? That point is -4, -6. Now you can do more points for this. I'm not going to do these points, but you could, I'm going to try and do it with as little as I can. If you could plug in 0, negative, or not plug in, but you could put on your chart 0, -2. You could put on 2, comma 0, which is there. Next one I'm going to put on, though, is the next most important one, which is right there. And that's the point 4, comma 2. And then let's go ahead and put on this one that's down here. Actually, I think I'm going to pick this one. Doesn't really matter which one you pick. But so that's when I shift it one right, it's not going to cause me any grief. That's the point 7, comma -4. Again, this is the long way to do it, but it's perfectly all right. Okay, so we're going to multiply y by a half. So I'm not going to change the x's. So it's going to stay 8, -4, 4, and 7. I'm going to multiply the y's by a half. So 0 times a half is 0. -6 times a half is -3. 2 times a half is 1. And -4 times a half is -2. And if you go back to the first time I did this, just by like looking at it, these are the points that were on that dashed graph after I multiplied by a half. Then what am I going to do? I'm going to add 1 to x and subtract 3 to y. Okay. So we have 8 plus 1 is... Sorry, I apologize. Yeah, no, we're good. Okay, sorry, no, we're not good. This should have been -8, 0. That's why I don't like doing it this way. This is me personally. I just make too many mistakes this way. I just find the other way easier. So this should have been -8, 0, that first point. Okay, so let's add 1 to x. That gives me -7. If we take -4 plus 1, that's -3. 4 plus 1 is 5, and 7 plus 1 is 8. So I've added 1 to all the x's. Okay? Now I'm going to subtract 3 from all the y's. 0 minus 3 is -3. -3 minus 3 is -6. 1 minus 3 is -2. And -2 minus 3 is -5. So now we'll just plot those points. -7, 1, 2, -3, which is right there. Okay, then we have -3, 1, 2, 3, -6, which is right there. Okay, then we have 5, comma -2. So we have 5, comma -2. And then we have 8, comma -5. Okay, and then we'll connect them up. Again, I don't really care for this method myself. I make too many mistakes, but it's a perfectly good method. I'm just saying for me personally, I make too many mistakes. So also, I find you don't really get the feel for stretching and compressing, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that's the first part. Next part. And then, okay. Same graph. Oh, what happened? That was beautiful. Get rid of that. Get rid of that thing. Get rid of all this junk, whatever that is. I have no idea what all that stuff is. Okay, anyway. I don't know what happened there, but. Okay. And if you go back and look at the thing we graphed before, when I just did it by looking at it, it's the exact same graph. What you don't get here, though, is that feel, like you don't see, okay, I smashed this by a half first and then shifted it. You really don't get a good feel for what you've done. And I make too many mistakes, quite honestly. Okay, main reason why I don't care for this method. Okay, let's take a look at this one then. Okay, so let's pick some points on the graph. I don't know, probably down here at the bottom. And I don't know, really any points, this one and this one. If you connect those up, you're pretty much getting the curve. So those should be good. Okay, so we're going to multiply y by -2. All right. So let's take the point on the, and we could take more points. We could take points out here. We could take a point there. We just don't need to, okay? The first three that I showed you should be good enough. Okay? So let's take this point on the left. Okay, that's the point 5, 0. So if I multiply y by -2, multiplying 0 by -2, it doesn't go anywhere, so that point stays there. This point here has a y-coordinate of 2, so without changing x, sorry, it has a y-coordinate of -2, so without changing x, I'm going to multiply -2 by -2 and go up to 4. And then this next one has a y-coordinate of 0, so it just stays there also, because 0 times -2 is just 0. So what do you get? You get this. And again, it's not the graph, so I'm just going to kind of dash it. Just kind of an intermediate step. Notice, it's kind of stretched out and flipped over. Okay? Now, some people will do the stretch and the reflection, in other words, flipping it over separately. You may. I just find it easier just to do it all in one time, because all you're doing, I never even use the word stretch, compress, or reflect, really. For the most part, I just say multiply y by -2, and it has the net effect of doing that, of, flipping it over and stretching it by 2. Okay, and then I'll go to left. So I'll take this point that's on the left side here, and I'll go to left. At that point, take this point up at the top and go to left. Get that point. Take this point on the right side of the curve and go to left, and you get that. And then just connect them up. Okay? See, and I can see it here. Okay, I've flipped it over, I've stretched it, and I've shifted it 2 to the left. Right? Whereas if you do this with XY tables, again, that's fine. The 3 points we started off with. So again, take a look at this. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of it. Okay, and what if you don't want to do it that way? And it's perfectly all right to not want to do it that way. Okay, let's pick some points. So we have what? That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, -5, 0. This is -3, -2. And this point is -1, 0. And what I'm going to do is multiply y by -2. Okay? So what do we get? Without changing the x's, so we have -5, -3, and -1. I'm going to multiply the y's by -2, so I get 0, 4, and 0. And if you go back and look at the first way I did it, that dashed graph, those are the points that I graphed. Okay, next, what am I going to do? I'm going to add 2. Sorry, not add 2. I apologize. I'm going to subtract 2 to x. So I'm not going to change the y's. Okay? So -5 minus 2 is -7. -3 minus 2 is -5. -1 minus 2 is -3. And these are going to stay the same. Okay, so now I'll plot -7, 0, -5, 4, and -3, comma 0. And then I'll connect them up. You get the exact same graph. Go back, in this video and look at the way I did it before. You get the same graph. But what you don't get the feel for here is what I've done. That you multiplied it, flipped it over, and then moved it. Okay? All right, last one. And I'm going to do this strictly I'm not going to make any of the XY tables here because this is really the same thing we did before. What we're going to take a look at is, first of all, is a square root of x. And you should know these 3 points give you your square root of x graph. Now, it's not the final answer, so I'm not going to make it solid. So what am I going to do with each of those? I'm going to go 1 right and 2 down. So I'm going to take this point on the leftmost point and go 1 right and 2 down. Take this next point and go 1 right and 2 down. And then take this next point and go 1 right and 2 down. And that's the graph of that. Okay? So, should you be experts in this at this point? No. Okay? The next file, well, I'll tell you what. I'll explain the way I've set it up. So, watch the beginning of the next file and then kind of turn it off or whatever, and I want you to do it on your own. That does you no good to just keep watching me do it. You have to do it on your own, and then eventually I'll, show you what you really should be doing. So go to the next one, and again, I'll explain the way I've set up the page because it might look a little strange, and then I'll give you a shot to work on it on your own. All right. Consuelo, everybody.